What's up, everybody? This is John Raymond coming at you from the workshop, and today we're going to talk about a topic that is really essential for all improvising musicians to not only understand but also to be able to do when they play, and that is how to make the changes. So you may have heard that phrase before, I want to make the changes, or we should be nailing the changes when we play. What does that mean exactly? Well, essentially what we're talking about is when chord changes happen, we need our ideas and our melodies and our lines to land, to resolve on chord tones on strong beats of the measure, right? So even though we feel, for example, a swing feel, we snap on 2 and 4, those are off beats, those are syncopated beats, right? The strong beats are what gives us that sense of resolution. And so if we're not hitting chord tones on strong beats of the measures where the chord tones, or where the chords rather, where they fall, we're not going to sound like we're making the changes because we're not outlining or communicating them clearly. So what I want to do is walk through a pretty simple 3-step process for how to develop some different ways to make the changes over any tune that you're working on. Now, before we get started with this process, one of the things that's going to be foundational to every step of this is that really what we're going to go for is this idea of being able to isolate a specific chord tone and to try to connect that chord tone in every chord of a song that we're playing on. So what I mean is, say for example we take the thirds or the fifths, sevenths, ninths, 11ths, 13ths. We could take any of these chord tones that's ideally not the root, right? And if we target these notes to try to land on those notes in every chord of a song that we're playing, that's going to give us a clear direction and naturally sound pretty melodic when we're playing through the chord changes. So as we walk through these 3 steps, that's the process that we're going to use, is isolating one of these chord tones, targeting it and aiming for it to land on it for every chord that happens over the course of the song. Okay. So the 3-step process here is pretty simple. We're going to work on connecting these isolated chord tones in 3 different ways. First, we're going to work on them via scales. Then we're going to work on them via enclosures. And then last but not least, we're going to work on them via arpeggios as well. So first, let's dive into connecting these chord tones via scales. So what you should do is pick a tune that you're working on and select a chord tone, again, anything but the root. 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th. Pick one of those chord tones that you're going to isolate and target on each chord. And then when you improvise through it, your objective here with scales is to connect as seamlessly as possible from one of those chord tones to the next in the next measure, right? So say for example we're playing the tune All the Things You Are, and we take the thirds, right? What's nice about this tune is that the melody is really based around the thirds, so it's easy for us to hear. But this is a good chance for us to work on how to actually connect linearly via a scale from one third to another. So let me demonstrate this a little bit. I'm going to go really slowly and just use diatonic passing tones in the scale that I'm working with to connect third to third on each chord. Now, as I said, you can also do this with any other chord tone that's not the root. So let's take the ninths, for example, right? If we take the ninths, it'll have a little bit of a different color to it. And we're still going to have to follow through the changes with the scales that are appropriate to the chords that we're on so that we can connect one ninth to another, right? So I'll try that now, again, on All the Things You Are. And this time, instead of using only diatonic notes, I might involve a chromatic note as well if I can get to it seamlessly and it helps me get to the ninth that I'm going to in a little bit more of a smooth way. Check it out. So as you can tell, there's a couple different options when we're playing through these different chord tones, right? I have to choose the direction which I go. I have to choose exactly what notes are going to be my passing tones between these chord tones as well. But they give us a clear direction, which that's what's maybe the most important thing about this exercise, is we're targeting these specific notes, landing them on strong beats so that we make the changes and we communicate them clearly. Okay, so now for the second step. Let's talk about enclosures. So we're going to take, again, another chord tone over all the things you are, but this time, instead of getting to it from a scale, we're going to use a 2 or a 3 or even a 4-note enclosure, which really just means a way of playing around the note diatonically and or chromatically until you get to the note, right? So I'm going to demonstrate this again playing on the thirds. Those are going to be my target notes over all the things you are, and I'm going to get to them via enclosures this time instead of using scales. One note about using enclosures that might be helpful for you, if you're finding yourself not able to keep track of exactly how to get from one chord tone to another, you may even be more specific with yourself and choose a specific enclosure that you're going to do to get to these chord tones. So for example, like a 2-note enclosure would be a diatonic note above and chromatic note below, and then landing on the chord tone, right? You still get to choose the rhythm in which you're going to do it, and you're still choosing the direction that you're going to go to get from third to third in this example. But you're using a little more specificity with that enclosure, which could help you be able to nail the changes even better. Lastly, let's now use some different arpeggios to get to the chord tones that we're going to, okay? And really what I mean by an arpeggio is I mean probably like a 3 or 4-note arpeggio that lands and resolves on the chord tone that you're going to. So for example, if I take the fifths now of all the things you are, right, and I'm going to, in our first chord, F minor 7, and I'm going to, in this case, C, right? One enclosure could be playing G, B flat, D, and then landing on C, right? Or if I was doing a 4-note enclosure, maybe I'd go E flat, G, B flat, D, and land on C. Or something similar where I'm coming from above and landing on it that way, right? You get the idea. So we're going to try this now. Take one note of a tune that you're working on. In this case, I'll use the fifths of all the things you are, and try to now get from one fifth to another using only arpeggios. Now, you may notice with all of these examples, I'm taking these fairly slowly, right? I would really recommend doing this when you are working on making the changes, because you have to give your ear and your brain, as you're thinking and conceptualizing the chord changes, you have to give that time to adjust to what's going on, right? And time to work out how to get from one note to another via a scale or an enclosure or an arpeggio. So don't be afraid to take this process nice and easy, start slow, and gradually work up the tempo with each, right? And after you've isolated all three of these different steps for how to make the changes, what then you can do is practice incorporating all of them in an organic way that makes sense to you and your ear and how you're hearing your phrasing, right? So I'll try that one last time. I'm going to try to incorporate all three of these things, scales, enclosures, arpeggios, to get to specific chord tones in all the things you are. And in this example, I might actually choose not to hit specific thirds or fifths of every chord. I might just open it up now, once I've done the work, and try to land on any chord tone that my ear is taking me to, right? But I'm always targeting notes to land on the strong beats of the measure. That's the thing that's always there. So let's give it a shot, see how it goes. So I hope you can see that walking through this process, it shows us that making the changes is not just something that elite improvisers can do, right? Anyone can do this because all that we're doing is targeting specific notes, right? Those targets give us sort of a framework in which to build our lines, build our melodies. And if we work on these different ways of getting to and from melodic notes in the chords, landing them on the strong beats, as we talked about, you're going to be making the changes in no time. And it's only a matter of practice and repetition until you get really comfortable and feel very natural with this process. So I hope this is helpful. Leave a comment or a question if you've got it. And I'd love to check out how you guys are working out making the changes as well. So feel free to tag me on social media if you are working on this, and I'd love to check out how the progress is going for you.